Tonight on Bridge City News, the Stephan trial continues. We will have an update on today's testimony. Our Lethbridge Waste and Recycling Center was buzzing with excitement today as the media was invited to check out the new beehives on site. A former Hell's Angel member is doing his part to help Vancouver teens avoid gang life with his Yo Bro, Yo Girl youth initiative.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. The case of the death of 19-month-old Ezekiel Stephan back in March of 2012 resumed this week and could wrap up later this week. Justice Terry Claxon said Monday that he wants to finish the trial by the end of the day this Friday. Ezekiel's parents, David and Colette Stephan, are each charged with one count of failing to provide the necessaries of life. Today's proceedings continued with testimony from Dr. Annie Savageau, a forensic and anatomical pathologist. BCN's Loris Alexander has more.
Dr. Annie Savageau has years of experience as a forensic pathologist, and several of those years were spent as Alberta's chief medical examiner. Savageau in court today again arguing that while Ezekiel had meningitis, that's not what caused his death. Savageau believes that Ezekiel died of hypoxic brain injury, lack of oxygen to the brain, because he went without oxygen for nearly 9 minutes after he was picked up by Cardston ambulance. The trial, including closing arguments by the Crown and defense, is expected to conclude by the end of the week. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Lethbridge police have charged a 27-year-old woman in connection with an armed robbery and 2 arsons. An arrest warrant has also been issued for a 32-year-old man for his role in the robbery.
Further investigation by our criminal investigation section identified a suspect in a female Lethbridge resident. On August the 24th, police located that female and she was arrested without incident. And Tila Bailey Scout, 27 years old of Lethbridge, has been charged with robbery with a firearm disguised during the commission of an offense, as well as 2 unrelated arson charges from other incidents in the city. The second male, who was standing inside the business with her at the time of the offense, was identified as James Patrick Williams, 32 years old of Lethbridge. At the time, a warrant was issued for his arrest, as his whereabouts were unknown. He has since been located and was arrested by the Calgary Police Service and is currently in custody awaiting a bail hearing on these matters. And he's also been charged with robbery with a firearm and also disguised during the commission of an offense.
Lethbridge police have been investigating bicycle thefts throughout the city and have now charged 2 men in connection with a bicycle chop shop being operated in the garage of a North Side residence along the 600 block of 21st Street North. Multiple stolen bikes were recovered and 1 man was found in possession of methamphetamine. 58-year-old Carl George Pullman and Jesse Aaron Tabor, 40, are facing multiple charges. Police remind the public that if your bike is stolen, it's important to file a report. The county of Vulcan in southern Alberta will soon be home to the largest solar power project in Canada. The Alberta Utilities Commission gave its approval for the $500 million project, which gives the go-ahead to Greengate Power Corporation to begin construction next year. It's expected that the solar facility will generate as much as 400 megawatts at peak times, enough to supply more than 100,000 homes. The hope is that full commercial operations will begin in 2021. Lethbridge's Waste and Recycling Center is literally buzzing. 10 beehives are producing honey at the city's landfill site. Video journalist Ainsley O'Reilly got a sneak peek of the area and shares what she learned.
Lethbridge's landfill site does more than take care of discarded pop cans and pizza boxes. They're trying to take care of the environment in a number of ways. Beekeeping is one of them.
We're a landfill inner city. Now, we weren't at the time, a material recovery facility, and we like to people to recognize that we're trying to improve the environment and enhance the area around us, because we're very urban where we're at.
Hive Bee Supply in Calgary distributed the bees, and they sent an expert to the site.
We can tell in real time the temperature and the weight of the hives.
Eco Recycling, the city's partner in the initiative, predicts the bees could create nearly 2 tons of honey.
Bees will work at their own pace, but typically once we put the honey boxes on, they can fill it up quite quickly. They can fill this box with about 60 pounds of honey in a week with good conditions. It's not uncommon for us to get 200 pounds of honey from one colony in a season. The Alberta average is a little bit lower than that. It's about 148 pounds or so. That's taking into account there's a lot of beekeepers that use their hives for hybrid canola pollination, which is a very important industry in Alberta, southern Alberta specifically.
The city says it's highly possible that the sweet treat will be distributed to locals. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Southern Alberta's longest-running charity golf tournament teed off at the Lethbridge Golf and Country Club this afternoon. In its first 35 years, the tournament has made $930,000. Hosted by Lethbridge College, the funds will be going towards Kodiak Athletics.
Student athletes are non-traditional students. Again, they've got a full scale of their schedules, and so things like this obviously are great. And yes, this is the first time that 100% of the proceeds are going that way. You know, challenges with budgets, all those kind of things, they're trying to work. And so being able to give this, I guess almost as a carrot and a little incentive for the athletes to be able to earn it as well, it goes so long and it goes far. And because again, they're in a place where they need the help. And so this really helps them and puts them in a good spot.
So futsal and soccer are different seasons. So soccer is our outdoor season and it's the busiest. So yeah, we have practices every day and then tournaments on weekends. So it gets pretty busy for finding time to do school as well.
Student athletes from Lethbridge College assisted on the course throughout the day. Tributes to former Calgary Member of Parliament Deepak O'Brien were poured out yesterday at a memorial service attended by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who said O'Brien opened doors for new Canadians to become involved in politics. O'Brien, 69, died earlier this month from liver cancer. He became the first Hindu elected to the House of Commons in 1997 and was re-elected 6 times.
Deepak was justifiably proud to be a breaker of glass ceilings. He reminded us that the strength of free and democratic societies is not in the virtuous narratives and vanity of our leaders, but in the simple aspirations of everyday, hardworking families for a better life. And that there is no place better in this world to achieve those dreams than in Canada.
He was the longest serving member of South Asian heritage and the first ever Hindu member of Parliament. Deepak shared with anyone and everyone his everlasting desire to continue to promote Canada as a welcoming, compassionate nation based on fundamental freedoms and liberties.
And he walked up to me and introduced himself in the opposition lobby. And I remember him distinctly talking about how excited he was to be there. And I said to him, well, we have a lot to learn. And he said, we're smart guys, we'll figure it out.
For over 20 years, our father was a community servant, a voice for those who had no voice, and the voice of Canadian humanity on the international stage. These core values that he innately possessed is what made him a good man. But what made him a great man was that it didn't matter if you were a friend or a foe, a liberal or a conservative, in his writing or outside. When you needed help, he was there to guide, mentor, and often protect those who needed it.
Deepak O'Brien's son, Aman, hopes to carry on his father's legacy and has announced he will be seeking the federal Conservative nomination in the Calgary Forest Lawn constituency. Police in Regina say a Canada-wide warrant has been issued for a 29-year-old man in the death of a 3-month-old infant almost 2 years ago. Keenan Julius Spencer died in October 2017 after he was brought to hospital. Police say an investigation found enough evidence to charge Caitlin Wade Goodwill of Regina with manslaughter, but ongoing efforts to find him have not been successful. Anyone who may know Goodwill's whereabouts is asked to contact Regina Police, the RCMP, or Crime Stoppers. Starting this fall, new teachers in Ontario will have to pass a math test by scoring at least 70%. The Canadian Press has obtained a memo from the Deputy Education Minister that says the test will include both math questions based on elementary and secondary school concepts and questions on math assessment, planning, and facilitating student learning. The government says math test scores among public elementary students in Ontario have fallen over the last 5 years. The City of Vancouver says approximately 127 people living in Oppenheimer Park have accepted housing offers following a park board order last week which requested that tents and other structures be removed. It says now that the majority of the housing units have been accepted. The City and BC Housing will continue to work in the park to offer spaces at shelters within Vancouver. And the city says it has ongoing concerns for people sleeping in the park, and Vancouver Fire Rescue Service will continue removing items presenting health and safety hazards. BC Attorney General David Eby is comparing the aim of Oklahoma's lawsuit against Johnson & Johnson to his province's proposed lawsuit against dozens of drug companies, alleging that they falsely marketed opioids as less addictive than other pain medications. Yesterday, a court in Oklahoma ruled that Johnson & Johnson helped fuel the state's opioid crisis and ordered the company to pay $572 million to help cover health care costs associated with opioid addiction.
Today, Judge Bachman has affirmed our position that Johnson & Johnson, motivated by greed and avarice, is responsible for the opioid epidemic in our state. Johnson & Johnson will finally be held accountable for thousands of deaths and addiction caused by their activities. And at the end of the day, you can't sit in a corporate suite somewhere for the last 20 years and oversupply the country. 10 times more of this drug was coming in, and then you had concomitantly 15 times more people dying from opioid overdoses. So there's no question in my mind that these companies knew what was going on at the highest level. They just couldn't quit making money from it, and that's why they're responsible.
We are disappointed and disagree with the judge's decision. We believe that it is flawed. We have sympathy for all who suffer from substance abuse. But Johnson & Johnson did not cause the opioid abuse crisis here in Oklahoma or anywhere in this country. We do not believe that the facts or the law supports the decision today. We have many strong grounds for appeal, and we intend to pursue those vigorously.
And as Vancouver continues to deal with the problem of youth gangs coming from middle-class and even wealthy families, a former Hells Angel member, Joe Calandino, has launched a youth group called Yo Bro, Yo Girl Youth Initiative that aims to help teens avoid gang life through conversations and recreational activity.
I made it a choice to quit. I walked away from the drugs for a while. I went back to school. I started my own business. I went back into the lifestyle about 10 years later, and I became a full patch member of the Hells Angels. For me, the end of the line was a moment in a second where I got caught with $10 worth of crack cocaine, and they arrested me for selling to an undercover police officer. They looked at me and said, "We're going to take a chance." Teresa Campbell then gave me the opportunity to start developing programs, talking to kids, working within the schools. They're starting at a younger and younger age. These kids have so much access to a variety of drugs. There's some gaps in the system, but I think we are getting better at what we're doing. And the thing is, on the spectrum today, we're seeing a lot more mental health with our youth, and we're seeing a lot more usage. So whether it's treatment, the mental health, and or the proper resources for the intervention and prevention, we've got some work to do. These guys are consistently on top of having that dialogue with those kids. I didn't create this journey was created for me.
From an early age, just my entire friend group was just sort of involved in that lifestyle where we're getting into fights and we're sort of like identify ourselves. And for us, it's just like each high school sort of represented themselves. So if you go to that school, you're basically a part of the gang. Friends were like selling drugs, and they were the ones who were like heavily involved. So, the ones that are still alive, they're still involved in that for the most part. Some of them got shot, some of them overdosed. Basically, I saw the effect it was having on my family in particular. Once everyone was sort of like getting in trouble and things weren't looking too bright, and I got yanked out of that entire lifestyle like pretty quick, just from like 100 to 0, and I realized that this wasn't the place that I want to end up, and I could sort of like I sort of have to be taken out of that environment to then be able to look at it from the outside and to see like what everyone's doing, and then just be like, okay, maybe this isn't where I want to be. Joe pretty much saved my life when I got kicked out, and after that I sort of like, it was like a debt I had to pay back.
Our school, I would say it's better than before, than the things I've heard about past graduates like 2015, 2014. I think they were worse. Like I think they were getting better year by year. Like the sport, especially the sports, they bring in a lot. Sports do keep you away from all that stuff. Especially the program Yo Bro Yo Girl. Like since it started, a lot has changed.
The Yo Bro Yo Girl Youth Initiative has over 1,000 young people taking part in the program, ranging from elementary to high school students across Metro Vancouver. The state of Utah's health department is now investigating 21 cases of a severe lung disease in teens and young adults linked to vaping. That's up from 5 just last week. The department says people who used a mix of nicotine and marijuana e-cigarette products reported symptoms including coughing, shortness of breath, chest pain, fatigue, nausea, and vomiting. As the Amazon burns, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is waiting for French President Emmanuel Macron to apologize. Bolsonaro says Brazil will only accept an offer of international aid to fight the fires if Macron retracts comments that he finds offensive. He says Macron has called him a liar and questioned his trustworthiness and commitment to protecting biodiversity. Just yesterday, the G7 pledged $20 million, Canada pledged $15 million, and the UK $12 million to help fight the fires and protect the rainforest. Delegates at a conference in Geneva have agreed to limit the controversial sale of wild elephants caught in Zimbabwe and Botswana. Wildlife experts are calling it a momentous win for elephants because it restricts their sale to zoos. Animal advocates are pleased, but some feel the measure doesn't go far enough because it is not an outright ban on trade in live elephants. Humane Society International says the capture of wild African elephants for export to zoos and other captive facilities is traumatizing for individual elephants as well as their social groups. Meanwhile, about 250,000 British cats and dogs are taken to Europe on holiday by their owners each year. But if the UK leaves the European Union on October 31st without a divorce deal, which is looking increasingly likely, Britain could be chucked out of the European Union pet passport scheme, which could end up costing pet owners big time for kennel fees and pet sitting. It's also a concern for those who rely on service animals.
You can't just go to one of those countries and suddenly rent a guide dog. Hello you, hello you.
If they cancel the scheme and bring in something that's more complex, I don't think we would actually take them on holiday with us.
Good boy.
Before European pets had their own passports, animals arriving in Britain from the EU had to be quarantined for 6 months. It's looking a bit like a Goldilocks weather pattern for the next few days. Not too hot, not too cold. Weather details are coming right up. We enjoyed some sunshine in southern Alberta today, getting up to the 24-degree mark, and we should see clear skies overnight, dipping down to a low of 10. For tomorrow, sunshine and 23 degrees. Thursday, a mix of sun and cloud and 21. Some clouds roll in on Friday with a high of 23, but back to sunshine for the long weekend. 28 for Saturday, 27 for Sunday, and a mix of sun and cloud and a bit cooler, 23 degrees on Labor Day Monday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 24 degrees with an average low of 9. Highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1996 at 36 degrees. Our record low was only 3 degrees in 1942. Sunrise was at 6:37 this morning and sunset at 8:29 p.m. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country. It will be warm and sunny on the west coast, 27 in Victoria, 23 in Vancouver. Having a look across the prairies, sunny in Calgary with a high of 19 and a high of 20 in Edmonton. Regina will be 23 and sunny, but a chance of showers, and 22 in Saskatoon. In Winnipeg, morning clouds should clear away with a high of 22, a mix of sun and cloud in Toronto, and a high of 28 degrees. Ottawa is in for some rain and 25. Montreal will also have showers and a high of 22. But looks like lots of sunshine in Fredericton with a high of 27. Much the same for Halifax with a nice warm 28-degree high, and Charlottetown will see a high of 25. But you better grab your umbrella in St. John's for some periods of rain with a high of 17 degrees. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador says his government has reached a deal with domestic, Canadian, and American gas pipeline operators to solve a dispute over fees and payments. He says the companies agreed to restructure fees and take about a 30% lower profit margin, something that will save Mexico about $4.5 billion over the next 30 years. López Obrador says the private companies took advantage of the country when the contracts were signed under previous administrations. The Bank of Nova Scotia is raising its dividend by 3 cents to 90 cents per share. The bank announced this morning that it earned $1.98 billion in its third quarter. That beat expectations and was up from $1.94 billion in the same quarter last year. The Bank of Montreal reports its third quarter profits rose by 1% to $1.56 billion. The bank missed expectations as growth in its capital markets division was offset by lower earnings in wealth management and higher provisions for credit losses. BMO's chief executive Darryl White says the bank delivered strong operating results during the quarter, demonstrating the resilience of the lender's diversified North American platform. Now here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta Utilities Commission has given approval for a new $500 million solar power project to be constructed in the county of Vulcan. The G7 summit has wrapped up. What was accomplished, and where's the U.S.-China trade war headed? We spoke with our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari on this and more. That is straight ahead. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. Get ready for a weekend of fun as Fort Whoop-Up wraps up another successful summer season. The wrap-up begins Saturday, August 31st and runs through Labor Day, September 2nd. Enjoy great family fun with plenty of activities for all ages. Plus, on Sunday, September 1st, the Alberta Horse Artillery will be there. For more information on times and cost of admission, visit galtmuseum.com. Misty Creek Dog Rescue is holding an adopt-a-thon from 12 to 3 p.m. on Saturday, September 7th. Come to Homes Alive South and meet some of the friendliest puppies and dogs available for adoption. For details and future events, go to mistycreekdogrescue.com or visit their Facebook page. The 2019 FlexAir Parkinson's Step and Stride fundraising walk is taking place Sunday, September 8th at Henderson Lake Park. Registration is at 1 p.m. with the walk beginning at 2. This is their largest fundraising event, and money raised goes to support services, education, and research that makes every day better for those with Parkinson's disease and the people who care for them. To register and to donate, visit parkinsonassociation.ca/stepandstride. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
The G7 summit has wrapped up. What was accomplished, and where's the U.S.-China trade war headed? We'll discuss this and more with our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, who joins us via Skype from Los Angeles. Hi, Lisa. So busy weekend in France. Was anything significant accomplished, do you think? I mean, were there any advances in trade agreements, that sort of thing?
No, not really. But are there ever really any advances at these acronym type meetings and summits that are held annually? I think these are just feel good events. The media loves it because it kind of likes to pit characters against one another and say what will happen on the sidelines of the G7 summit, what will happen, between this country and this country who are in some sort of a row. This year, obviously, all eyes were on a handful of countries, obviously Donald Trump going over there, the Europeans cozying up to Iran. Iran wasn't going to come. The Europeans invited them to come. A little bit of a slick move by France. And of course, China. China is the question mark in terms of foreign policy, or one of, for Donald Trump, and whether or not the U.S. will get some sort of decent deal with the Chinese government over trade. Both sides are suffering. Both sides have placed tariffs on the other. Major economies here, but we're hoping for a softening of tones and a softening of rhetoric moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you did hear that from the reporters saying there was definitely, a distance between Trump and the other 6 leaders. There was a tension there. Now, Donald Trump, kind of brushing it aside, saying, no, we're all getting along pretty good. Things turned out well. But I'm guessing there probably was some very real tension there. Would you agree there?
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. Donald Trump really can't catch a break here, whether it's domestically or regarding foreign policy. But, I know these weren't particularly his friends who were gathered. With regards to China, I think the tension is there. But I will say the silver lining is that the headlines coming out at the tail end of the G7 were that, China's looking to have calm talks going forward, which is positive news. So even if there's negative news coming out of the G7, perhaps the media can focus on some sort of positive news going forward, that there may be some sort of negotiation or sit down with the Chinese that will be quieter, much more friendly going forward. Outside the G7, I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth. This is the 2 news stories from the weekend, but outside the G7, protesters, and of course, this is the kind of the anti-globalization movement. We're seeing this a lot all over, particularly in Europe, particularly in France. What do they even want? It's not clear, but people are in protest mode. Resistance, right? That's what we're hearing a lot of all over. So
Oh, for
more
sure.
of that.
Yeah, and of course, climate change always comes back in these kinds of meetings as well. Now, Donald Trump, I understand, sat out of most of these talks on climate change. Any thoughts on that? And again, I mean, I guess the rest of the leaders probably, they're in sync on their view on climate change, but Donald Trump being the exception here.
Yeah, the whole conversation around climate change, it's really unfortunate. And it's unfortunate because it's become so polarizing when it's something that's so it's scientific, either it is or it isn't, but it's not the big deal that the left makes it. And therefore, the right to counteract that needs to say it's not a big deal at all. So they basically stay out of the conversation or make light of the conversation. That's what we're seeing here. Donald Trump saying, well, there's so many bigger issues, especially on the world stage, that if we're gathering, what are we talking about here? Is there scientific proof for climate change? Not to the extent that these people are pushing it. I mean, there's so many comical memes all over social media that talk about, is this an issue? Well, no, let's blame it on climate change. Or is this an issue? Let's blame it on climate change. And that's how silly this conversation about climate change has become, that it's become the left's go-to. Here in the United States, we've already had a couple rounds of the Democrat debate candidates for 2020. We've had a couple rounds of debates, and it always comes back to, well, we need to push climate change. We need to push climate change. Well, I'm sorry, if we can't keep our borders safe, and we can't keep terrorists out of our borders, and if we can't, protect our assets in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan and Iran and the Persian Gulf, I don't think you're going to have to worry about climate change much longer, because a nuclear bomb could land on our shores. So, it's a bit comical when you think about the extent to which this issue is pushed. And again, that counter voice that needs to minimize it in order to make the illustration of how silly it is to prioritize this issue.
Yeah, it needs some perspective, some context, doesn't it, for sure. Now, Brazil's president, Bolsonaro, he didn't seem to appreciate the gesture from the G7, speaking climate change, to, their help offered to fight the Amazon fires there. And again, somewhat overstated in the sense that they're using some dated pictures back from 2003, I think, at the wrong fire pictures up there, but a much better picture, I guess, and also, the statement that 20% of the world's oxygen comes from the Amazon forest, which again is overstated. Not that it's not important, certainly it is. But so Bolsonaro was saying, hey, we're not, a colony here, right? We're saying, yeah, we got some of this, we've got some technology here, we've got some know-how here as well. We're not as dependent on, the G7 as they may think. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Bolsonaro is in a very, very delicate situation, because on the one hand, as you clearly pointed out, his frustration is that he's not a charity case. He's doing well. He's able to, and that's why you see some of the headlines that are also exaggerated, where he says, we need no help at all. We don't want anyone coming in here, which again, exaggerated. But on the other hand, Bolsonaro does not want an example made of him and his country. He's new in office. It's that whole new sheriff in town is a great way to put it. He's changing the way that people view Brazil, particularly in the landscape of a Democrat socialist country like Venezuela, or countries that support that kind of mentality in Latin America. He wants to make Brazil a very strong economy, a very strong country. And in his eyes, the way that the Amazon fire is being perceived and treated is going to weaken that image. And I think that that's what he's referring back to. But
Yeah, I'm no expert on Brazil, but I do understand that some of the farmers in that area, it's not uncommon for them to actually be lighting fires this time of the year to clear the forest area to grow more crops, right? So so there's a number of things going on here, right? So is it climate change? Well, I hardly think it's climate change if somebody's setting the fire deliberately.
Right. As you said, clearly there's use. He doesn't want this to be the agenda of any one talking point. These fires are happening. We have fires here in California, so I can understand how they could be very devastating in certain aspects. This is more of a natural body. So it's considered something, that's very sad. But, what's interesting, Paul, is that you see so many of these kind of Monday morning quarterback, like humanitarian types, jumping on the story and posting it on Instagram and posting it on Facebook. And all of a sudden, everyone's concerned about the Amazon. Meanwhile, I don't know how many people can really point it out on a map of those people posting about it. But I think, like you said, this is a very nuanced issue. This is, it surpasses, that conversation about climate change. It's political, it's natural, it has a lot to do with agricultural and economical decisions as well, as you pointed out. So, I think it's not right to look at it from this one single perspective, but to look at it much more broadly. And I think Brazil knows what they're doing.
Okay, yeah, we'll watch that with interest over the next few weeks. Now, the G7 summit, you had mentioned again the surprise visit from Iran's foreign affairs minister, Zarif. So he didn't just show up. I'm assuming he had some sort of an invitation. Now, I don't know if that's directly from France or if it's a combination of invites from the other 6 country leaders. Now, did Trump know about that in advance as well? Obviously there's that's kind of the conflict there, Iran and America, tied in with the whole nuclear development and so forth. And so what was that all about? Is that tied in with, hey, let's get a deal going here. We need your oil, Iran, and we'll make a way to do this?
This was a very interesting interaction because on the one hand, he was there. And on the other, Iran is still chest thumping and saying, we want to export more oil. We want to enrich more uranium, and we have no, plans to sit down and concede any of this with the United States. At the meantime, they're hoping that the Europeans bail them out and that the Europeans stick to, or at least sign into, a deal similar to the JCPOA, which was the Iran nuclear deal, which will be called the P5+1, which the United States pulled out of in May of 2018. Now, why Zarif was there? Well, it appears that Macron of France and the Iranians have been meeting in order to come up with something of a deal, or to at least maintain the relationship, or at least the economic relationship between the two bodies. France is leading that. I think the UK got a little bit shaky with that whole tanker situation. And, it was funny because during those days of waiting to see, if tensions increase more between the UK and Iran, those were in that time period is when France met with Iran, which is very, very interesting to see a European nation go at it alone and to kind of step over another European nation. Now, remember, Brexit didn't happen. The UK is still part of the EU. They still are functioning as a body. They still have more leverage to negotiate as a body. But let's just say that the Europeans would love to maintain a deal with Iran, and Iran is looking for them to save their economy, move forward with them, and Iran is getting impatient. So what better than for Zarif to make this surprise visit to the G7 and say, here we are, and we're not going away.
Okay, yeah, no, this will be ongoing for some time. And matter of fact, if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about Iran and Israel here too. That's all part of this as well. Let's just back up for a bit here too. We had touched on the China-U.S. trade war. Wanted to just explore that a bit further there. Again, Trump saying that he regretted not raising tariffs even higher while he was at the G7 there. He had mentioned that. And at the same time, he also said he got a couple of encouraging phone calls from China. So a little hard to sort all of that out. And as you mentioned, there was a bit of a softening in tone from China there as well. But in the meantime, it does look like, just practically speaking, the tariffs just went up on both sides, didn't they?
Yeah, this was Friday, right before the markets closed. And yeah. I don't know if you follow the stock market, Paul, but it was bloody. On a Friday afternoon, for that news to be announced that both sides are going, against each other and raising the tariffs, there's no relent. And, it seems as though the U.S. feels that they have the leverage, they have the upper hand, and therefore they're able to raise the tariffs. But China, it looks like, is playing, head to head, and they raise the tariffs just as much. So we're feeling it here in the United States, and many segments of the economy are directly affected. I know those who are involved in construction or in electronics or in import-export they're feeling the pinch quite a bit and quite drastically. The stock market as well, and we're headed towards the 2020 election here. So this is something that Donald Trump, he must be very confident about going forward. But at the same time, the Chinese, they're not backing down. So
yeah, hopefully something happens here because, like you say, an election coming up as well. Very interesting how this will all turn out, but it creates an uncertain economic environment for sure. Now, if we can briefly touch on Israel here as well. Now, they're saying they over the weekend here they stopped some Iranian Revolutionary Guard killer drone strikes, apparently. I think they were coming from Syria, and I think there were also a number of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip at Israel, and there were thousands of residents ended up rushing to bomb shelters. I think there was an outdoor concert going on, that sort of thing, and so lots of stuff going on there.
Lots of stuff, but I might add it's just a day in the life of an average Israeli. This is what they go through, enemies to the north, to the south, to the west. And it's exactly what they deal with, and they know that these enemies exist. So you have the Gaza Strip on one side, you have Syria to the north, you have Lebanon to the south, and this is ongoing. So they foiled this drone attack coming from Syria. That would be launched directly by the IRGC, which is the Revolutionary Guard Corps, this elite paramilitary group that is obviously an arm of the Iranian military. And as we know, they're functioning as a paramilitary or a proxy within Syria right now, and they're quite active there. They're using that as a launch pad to threaten Israel, particularly when these tensions rise between the West and Iran. Israel is right there and is, kind of the token enemy that can be targeted. You also have Lebanon, where Hezbollah is housed, and you have threats there. And of course, the Gaza Strip, where Hamas is operating. So you think about these three terror organizations surrounding Israel, a country the size of New Jersey, where children are playing. It's summertime. They have to get into these bomb shelters, etc. So a day in the life.
Yeah, feel for the kids, frankly, on both sides of that border there. Wow. I mean, I'm thankful to be living here in Canada for sure. And now, thankfully, the Iron Dome defense system seemed to work too and intercepted a couple of those missiles. So I guess that's good news as well to hear. I'm running out of time here. Thanks so much, Lisa. Appreciate you making time for us again.
My pleasure.
With the recent mass shootings in the United States and 14 separate shootings that took place in Toronto over the August long weekend, there's been increasing calls for stricter gun control. But what's the answer? Joining me now to talk about it from Winnipeg, Manitoba is Conservative Senator Don Plett. Don, welcome to BCN.
Thanks, Hal. Be happy to be here.
I think most Canadians would agree that we have a bit of a gun violence problem here. But how do we fix it? I mean, Toronto Mayor John Tory is asking the federal government for a handgun ban, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said he will consider additional gun control measures. But what do you think of a handgun ban?
Well, hell, handgun bans just simply don't work because, first and foremost, criminals simply ignore all laws, including handgun bans. So they will be the ones running around with handguns. Plus, we already have a handgun ban to a large extent. All illegal guns are right now banned. And handguns used for illegal purposes are banned. The emphasis, hell, should be on enforcing existing laws, not creating new ones.
Now, it's interesting that the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police say they will not be supporting a call for a ban on handguns, pointing out that so many guns simply just come in from the United States.
Well, you're absolutely right. And in this case, the Canadian Association of Police Chiefs got it absolutely right. In the majority of cases involving gun violence, handguns being used are already illegal. And it makes no sense to ban something that is already prohibited. I agree with the police chief president, Adam Palmer, when he said, in every single case, there are already offenses for that. They're already breaking the law, and the criminal law in Canada addresses all of those circumstances.
Now, Bill C-71, the gun legislation recently passed by the federal government, and it makes the background checks go back over an applicant's entire lifetime. Some see this as a good thing, but you disagree. Why is that?
Well, absolutely. The intention behind a lifetime background check is a laudable one. Our bigger problem, however, is that the existing background check requirements are not being properly carried out. For example, Alexander Bazinet fell through the cracks because he lied on his firearms license application. So when you lie, you just simply get approved. Extending background checks to a lifetime is problematic due also to the lack of resources. As of December 31st, 2017, there were 109,531 license holders in Canada. In 2017, the RCMP issued 401,884 individual licenses, including almost 300,000 renewals. We're going to ask them to do lifetime background checks on all these people. They don't have the resources to do it. They're not even going to try to do it.
You know, a big concern is that the bill seems to put a lot of red tape onto target shooters, hunters, and farmers. A lot of the farmers here in southern Alberta are not happy about it. Now, for example, the bill will require handgun owners to first get an additional permit before taking their firearm to a gunsmith shop for repair. How exactly does that make anyone safer?
Bill C-71 doesn't make anyone safer. Bill C-71 misleads Canadians by pretending that it is addressing gun violence. Taking guns to a gunsmith shop. You take a gun from home to a gun range. You have ammunition jammed in the chamber. You have a loaded cartridge jammed in a chamber on a gun. You have to take that gun home first, get a permit to take it to a gunsmith, when there could well be a gunsmith across the street from the shooting range. It makes no sense. It makes things more dangerous, not safer.
Let me ask you something. How do we get the guns out of criminals' hands then?
By enforcing the existing laws that we have. By creating new laws. These new laws do not target criminals. The new laws target duck hunters, sports shooters, target shooters. They do not target criminals. We need to enforce the existing laws that we have, and we're not doing it. We are trying to use things like Bill C-71 as an election issue, and it should not be. It should be about safety, not about getting reelected on suggesting we are tougher on gun crimes. Let me tell you, Hell, Bill C-71, in order for even part of Bill C-71 to become law, it has to go through an order in council. We passed Bill C-71 some months ago. Every segment of Bill C-71 has to go through an order in council. There hasn't been one applied for it. The government hasn't started with one order in council, and yet we were in a panic to get this done before we rose for the summer. The RCMP are telling us they are not starting with anything because they fully believe that if the Conservatives get elected in October, this is all going out the window again. There was no panic. The government clearly wanted to just simply mislead Canadians into thinking that they were being tough on crime.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned duck hunters, farmers, ranchers. Many rural Canadians we've spoken with have some bad memories of the Liberals' long gun registry. Does C-71 in some way create a backdoor long gun registry?
Yes, Hell, this absolutely creates a gun registry by the back door. We are registering firearms. They have to be registered. And Ralph Goodale is running around pretending that it is not, and it is a long gun registry absolutely by the back door.
Now, the Liberals have said they want to put decision-making about weapons restrictions back in the hands of police and not politicians. Many believe that's a good idea, but you think otherwise.
I believe that elected officials have to be accountable. There is no question we should avail ourselves of the resources of the RCMP. But to allow the RCMP, who are not accountable, to create laws and to create, if you will, classifications of firearms is absolutely the wrong way to go about it. It has to be elected officials that do this. It has to be people that are accountable to the electorate that make these decisions.
Now, the media often highlights assault rifles as needing to be banned. How are we classifying those assault weapons, Don? What is the difference between, let's say, an assault rifle and a hunting rifle?
Assault rifles are already banned in Canada. Again, as illegal handguns are banned in Canada, assault rifles are banned. Firearms that are fully automatic or that have a magazine of a capacity of more than 5 rounds are banned in Canada right now. The only people that have it, again, are the gangs and the criminals. The sport shooters don't have them. The hunters don't have them. Gang members have them. Banning them, creating another law, isn't going to make any difference.
I'm told that the bill will ban a number of guns that are currently legal. So how would that actually work? How will owners be informed that it's illegal, and how will it be enforced?
They'll have to read the newspaper to find out that it's illegal. It's again, absolutely ridiculous. There will be publications presented, clearly places like Wolverine Supplies, other firearm stores would have these publications. But you or I, if we have a gun that will be classified as illegal, we would have no way of knowing that. And if the gun is confiscated, we will have no recourse. It will be taken away from us. It doesn't matter what the value is. We will lose it. Stores that are selling them. Wolverine Supplies. I visited Wolverine Supplies in Virden, Manitoba just a week and a half ago. I saw their inventory. They would lose, and they would be out hundreds of thousands of dollars with no recourse of collecting it back.
When my father passed away, I inherited his gun collection, and one of them was an old Colt. And I mean, I've since sold all the guns like many years ago, but it was a Colt from the early 1900s, an amazing gun. It was almost like a piece of art, and it was very old, and it cost a lot of money. Now, some of these guns that'll be confiscated cost their owners thousands upon thousands of dollars, Don. Will the government reimburse them, or will owners perhaps launch a lawsuit?
Launching a lawsuit against the government is a fairly futile exercise. But that would be the only way that they would be able to get their money back. And hell, you are not the only one. There are thousands of people. We had witnesses come to our committee telling us about the firearms that they had and that they would lose and that they would not get compensated for. And it is mind-boggling that we have no concern over, again, it's not the criminals, it's legal people, people like yourself who have your father's or your grandfather's collector's item, and you would lose that with no recourse.
Wow. Now, at the end of the day, Don, big picture here, do you think Bill C-71 will have any effect on criminals, possibly reducing some of the violent crime or the mass shootings? Now, I'm thinking of maybe somebody who was a responsible gun owner, maybe had some mental health issues, and they go ballistic, pardon the pun. You know, maybe, will that help? Cut back on some of the violence?
It will have no impact on illegal gun activities. Gang members are telling us, and we heard this in New Zealand, who did a handgun or a gun ban after the Christchurch shooting. Horrible, horrible incident. The leader of the top gang there, when guns were banned by the Prime Minister the next week, said, "I'm sorry, Prime Minister, we're not handing in our guns." Well, this would be the same thing everywhere else. The criminals are not going to hand in their guns. It doesn't matter what John Tory wants to do. Hell, you don't ban vehicles from the road when you have some lunatic mowing down people on the streets of Toronto with his van. There is no talk about that. You put people like that in prison, and you keep them in prison, which is what the Conservative Party has always stressed. Let's be tough on the criminal. Let's make sure that they don't have early releases, but let's not target hunters and sport shooters.
What's interesting is I have a very good friend of mine that works at an ABC affiliate in Chicago, and he was telling me that even though they have some of the strictest gun regulations in Chicago, they have some of the worst gun crime in the entire United States. So do you think maybe somebody like John Tory would look at Chicago saying, well, it doesn't really impact them very much, it doesn't help them?
Well, you're absolutely right. Chicago, I think, has, as you said, the strictest gun laws in the entire country and the worst rate of criminal activity with guns. And you would think John Tory would look at that. I'm not sure why he isn't, because what John Tory is wanting to do will not help.
So what kind of changes would you like to see made here in Canada in effectively reducing violent gun crime?
Andrew Scheer has put forward a plan for a safer Canada, which will include ending automatic bail for gang members, revoking parole for gang members, create new sentences for violent gang crime, ensure that possessing a smuggled firearm means prison time, and create a CBSA firearms smuggling task force. These are concrete measures to help us with gun crimes. And the gun crimes we have are horrific, but they are not being committed by sport shooters and duck hunters.
Conservative Senator Don Plett, thanks so much for joining me today from Winnipeg.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.